Yo, this is the Black Manga Critic. What's going on, everybody? And finally, I'm getting back to manga reviews. It's really nice to be back to doing that, to sort of getting that content out there. I'm very, very happy about the fact that I can do that now. I just kind of, I have the time. The Rona is out. It is causing chaos, but I do have the time to get those reviews out and just kind of get back to it. So before I get into this manga review for Witch Hat Atelier by Kamome Shirahama, all right, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Feel free to follow me on Twitter, and feel free to support the Patreon. So with the support for Patreon, that really allows me to kind of just like improve the content that I put out onto YouTube on the Patreon and that I share on Twitter. You know what I mean? Just like, again, like any amount helps. Any amount helps. And I think that any Patreon person will tell you that, like, yo, if you give a dollar is super helpful. You know what I mean? Like, if you have a certain number of patrons, that's like, if I had 100 patrons that gave $1, that'd be $100, and I could like put that towards, certain types of subscriptions, to reviewing manga, to watching anime reactions, to, paying people who are going to be on the channel for interviews. So please, if you can support, please do. All right. And if you can't, then, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel and feel free to follow me on Twitter. There's no cost to that at all. And it means a lot. It means a lot when you do that. All right. So to get to the review, we got to talk about, again, Witch Hat Atelier by Kamome Shirahama. And this volume it's really good. That's all I got to say about that. Like right now, it's so good. I have not talked to anybody that thought that this volume wasn't great. That it wasn't like engaging, fun, beautiful to look at. It's just really, really a phenomenal overall job by Shirahama. And I'm gonna get into quite a few things when it comes to this review. I think sometimes, in my mind, I think, okay, maybe I want to do a short review, but I really want to get into the nitty gritty of things when I do reviews, because that's just something that I'm used to. Before, when I was like, trying to do the PhD thing, that's what I was doing: research, scholarly research, really getting into the nitty gritty of things, thinking about certain things. And this review might not be on that level, but I'm still going to get into certain things, and we're going to talk about a lot of things in this review. So, you know what it is. All right? Now, in terms of the summary, I'm just going to kind of go into it very quickly, just so you have a good idea of sort of what happens in the first chapter. Now, if you do not want to be spoiled, this review isn't for you, because I spoil things. I spoil things in reviews. I spoil things in videos that I make. I'm not going to be ashamed of that, because one, I told y'all. So if you keep watching the video, you're going to be spoiled. And then that's on you. I can't help you. All right? So anyways, to get into the summary, basically what happens is we meet this girl, Coco, who is very young. We're not necessarily sure about her age, but she seems she's like, maybe like 11 years old or something like that. Probably like 10, 11, maybe even 12. But I'd probably say probably like 11, maybe 12. All right? And she's fairly young. She loves magic, so we know that magic exists in this world. If there's a manga called Witch Hat Atelier, I'm pretty sure we know that there's going to be some magic that exists in that world, all right, in that fictional world. So Coco is working with her mother. Both of them work with fabrics. They sell fabrics. They, cut fabrics. They do a whole bunch of things with them, clothing, all that type of stuff. And Pegasus drawn carriage, right, a flying horse, right, comes through, lands. They have some customers. They clearly seem pretty upper class just based on what they're wearing and stuff like that. And then, Coco meets a witch, Queefrey, who is looking for some fabrics. He's looking for some new clothes. He wants to see if he wants some new clothes. He wants some new drip, right? So he comes in. He notices that Coco's really great at working with the fabrics, and he's very impressed. And then they start to have a conversation. And Queefy learns that Coco has adored magic for forever, and she would love to be a witch, but sort of the rules are that you can't be a witch unless you're born a witch, right? And that's just sort of the way it is. Later on, right, we learn that that's not really the case, because after a certain point, after a few pages, the carriage doesn't seem to be able to sort of fly properly, right? We realize that Coco realizes that, okay, Queefy's going to be here for a little bit, so we're going to make sure that we can sort of sneak around, see if we can find out how Queefy does his magic thing. And what we find is that magic is done by drawing symbols, right, or sigils, or whatever you want to call them. But magic is mainly done by drawing. At least up until this point. I don't really know if there's any other way to do it, but at least up until this point, that's what we know for Volume 1. All right, and Coco's like, "Yo, I gotta try this out. This is amazing." At some point in the manga, what we learned during Queefrey and Coco's conversation was that, some creepo dude, some creepo wizard who was wearing some weird mask, some weird eye mask, had sold Coco, and she was very young at the time, so he was super creepy. They were super creepy. Sold Coco a magic book with some symbols in it and a magic ink pen, right? So eventually, what we learn is that you need the special, you need the magic ink to do this, and you got to draw, and you need to draw certain symbols. Otherwise, that magic ain't working. So then, right, Coco starts to draw. She starts to get not amazing at it, but she's able to cast some spells. What happens is Coco tries to draw one of the symbols in the book that is pretty dangerous, and what happens is her mother ends up being petrified and turned into stone, essentially, or rocks, or whatever you want to call them, like rock crystals, I guess, or whatever. And Queefrey saves Coco from being petrified. So essentially, in chapter 1, we're like, okay, Queefrey saves Coco. Coco is just great, just so upset that all this happened, and then Queefrey's like, you know what? Usually we would erase the memories of people who learn magic when they're not supposed to learn magic, because the ability to draw magic is supposed to be a secret, because anybody with the right proper tools can do it. So Queefrey's like, you know what? There was something about that story that you told me that was a little weird. Like the person that sold you the ink and the book, they seem sort of suspect, and that reminded me of something that I'm looking into. So you know what? I'm not going to erase your memory. I'm going to turn you into a full-fledged witch, and you're going to come over to my atelier to live with me and my other apprentices, who are also other girls, and they're also learning magic. So that's pretty much what happens in chapter 1. I'm not really going to sort of summarize any more than that, because I do want y'all to read it on your own, see how you feel about the rest of the volume. And if I had to summarize the whole volume, it'd take way too much time to do it. So when it comes to the overall story, and this is kind of the segment where we're just kind of going to get into the overall story, how I feel about the story, and my thoughts. I think what's really great about this volume is that it has a really just kind of brisk sort of pace, where you never feel like things are moving too fast or things are moving too slowly. We don't spend too much time learning particular things. Sometimes when you're reading a particular manga, you get a lot of sort of exposition about this is how we do this thing, and this is how we do that thing, and this is how, and the only reason we're having this conversation is to show the reader this is what we're doing. But Shirahama's writing never really feels like that for too long, because I think oftentimes that exposition is necessary, but with Shirahama, with Witch Hat Atelier, you never feel like it's too long. It moves along pretty quickly, and I really like that. I can feel like I can kind of sit on the couch, read this volume, be entertained, and not feel like it's moving too slowly or too quickly. Also, what I really like about this volume is the sort of way in which they don't tell you too much. They tell you just enough so that you're really intrigued in terms of, oh, now I want to read this second volume, because I know that there's some stuff going on in this first volume, but I don't know how these things are happening, or I know a bit about magic now that I've learned the secret, but I don't know too much about how magic exactly works, and I do want to learn more, because this magic system is really interesting. That's the sort of thing that I kind of want to get into. The magic system is really great. I think what's awesome about that is sort of the way in which, right, there are different symbols, and the way that the magic symbols are drawn, directly affect how the spells work, right? So there's one point where, right, Coco is taking this test that she shouldn't really be taking, right? She takes this test, and she goes to this range, and she figures out that, if I change the spells in this particular way, I can make it so that this spell moves in a different way, and that will allow me to pass this test that I should not be able to pass at this point, because I have just gotten to the atelier, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I am legitimately like a rookie, a novice, all right? And the folks around in that atelier know it. So I really like that, again, there are little things that are great where you learn some things, right, where you can say, if you change the symbols in certain ways, they can affect the magic. But you don't learn too much, right? You don't learn too much too soon. And what it does allow you to do is to sort of think like, hey, if I were a witch, like how would I mess around with these spells? What would I do to sort of change the symbols to, make them work for me if I was in Coco's position? That's the kind of stuff that I like. It really allows you to sort of do a lot of the sort of imagination sort of work while you're reading the story. It's great. What I also really love about this volume is the way that the characters are sort of presented. You don't know too much about the characters, but you know enough to to sort of like them enough to be invested in their growth, to say, I want to know more about this person. I want to know more about that person. Right? We know a decent amount about Queefrey and his personality, but we don't really know too much about him. Right? And that sort of adds to the mystery of Queefrey. Queefrey is sort of one of those characters who, you learn a little bit about, that he's clearly a witch. He's pretty great at it. But he's done some things that aren't particularly, by the book. And that always makes for sort of a great character, because that a character like Queefrey, right, is just going to be great. Not only because he's attractive. I mean, look at him. Right? But what I really love about Queefrey is that he's not by the book, right? That he's going to do certain things if it means, saving the people that he cares about, if it means making sure that they have, a sort of healthy and happy life, that sort of thing, right? He wasn't supposed to take Coco. He wasn't supposed to do that. He was supposed to erase her memory and leave her with her petrified mom like a jerk. That's what he was supposed to do, but he didn't do that, right? So, again, Queefrey's a pretty decent person, but he understands that sometimes you got to break the rules. All right, sometimes you got to break the rules, because not breaking the rules means doing a really scumbag sort of thing. Another person that I really like is Coco. I think Coco was a great protagonist. You really get the sense that she's very young, right? And I think sometimes you have authors that don't really know how to write children. Like you might be reading a certain manga, and a child might seem like, and a child might be, 11 or 10 or whatever, something like that. And they read like they're 14 or 15 or something like that. And it's like, whoa. Slow the brakes. This is not it. Like 10-year-olds don't really act like 14 or 15-year-olds. Not really. Like they're just different things that they're going through, quite literally, physically, mentally, all that jazz. So I really love that Coco really feels like she's like 10 or 11. She feels like she's pretty young. She's clearly scared. She rushes into things. She makes rash decisions. But everything that she does is very earnest, and I think that's one thing about children that you sort of tend to find. A lot of the times when they do things, even if they're trying to be mischievous, there's a sort of earnestness to children. And that's something that I really like about Witch at Atelier. You can sort of see that, depending on the characters. Some characters like Tetia are, again, very young, but they're very earnest, and they're very nice, and they're accommodating, but sometimes they're not, because they're so focused on whatever it is that they're invested in, like children often are. And then you have someone like Agot. Oh boy. Let's get into Agot. Agot is one of those characters that when you get introduced to Agot, you're just sort of like, okay, this is what we gonna do, huh? This is what we gonna do. Now, when we get introduced to Agot, she flies all in, looking real cool, all right? She's like the sort of prototypical cool character that flies in, that does really dope stuff, but is just a jerk. Is just a jerk in the onset, and you're not really sure why they're a jerk, but it's almost like they have to be a jerk because something happened. You don't know. Again, you don't know what happened, but it was something that was bad enough to where they were like, oh damn, like it must have been really bad. Something really bad must have happened, because they are doing the absolute most now. If you see the panel that I just that I'm gonna put up here, what we see is Agot flies in, and then in the next few panels, we see the way that she interacts with Coco. Coco is a very nice girl. She has not really done anything that has been like problematic to Agot or to anybody else in the Atelier, but Agot has got it out for her. Oh my goodness. And we learn a little bit about why that is, but even then we're just kind of like, Agot, like relax, chill. All right? With what we see here is Agot sort of like, hey, you really shouldn't be here. All right? You're the one that messed up your mother. So, all right? And she's never gonna be depetrified. She's gonna be gone. And I was like, damn, Agot, you doing the absolute most. You doing quite a bit right now. What is going on here? And you just feel bad for Coco. You really do. Because Coco ain't do nothing. And again, there's this dynamic that sort of forms with Agot, with Coco. And you know that for quite some time during the story, that dynamic is going to be something that we continue to see. Agot being sort of maybe a bit of a sort of tsundere kind of character where she's just like, oh, maybe I want to like you, but I can't because of all these other things that I've gone through. And Coco is just going to keep trying. She's going to do that Naruto thing where she's just like, I want to be your friend and I'm going to keep trying to be your friend. And you love that because, again, it's endearing and they're children and they're not like grown adults who, you know, have more nuanced thoughts about what it means, you know, about what friendship is and how, you know, treating certain people might, you know, say, hey, I don't want to be your friend because you treated me like garbage, right? So I really, really like that sort of dynamic. And I just like the characters. I think the characters are really cool. So Queefree is great. He's attractive. We understand that. There's Alaria, I guess is how I would pronounce it. I'm not sure. Alaria, I guess. I would say Alaria, right? And she's beautiful. There's just a lot of attractive people in this manga. And then here's both of them being attractive. So when we talk about some other, like one more character I kind of forgot to mention, I wanted to sort of mention the brim caps because the brimmed caps sort of look really creepy, and they're supposed to look creepy, right? They're supposed to be antagonists. It's very clear that they're supposed to be sort of in the way in a certain sense. But maybe if we think about it, it doesn't seem too much like they are in the way. It seems like they might be actually trying to help Coco because they give her magic for a reason. And apparently by the end of the sort of volume, you sort of realize, oh, Coco's supposed to be their hope, right? And then we end on that note during the manga, and it's like, damn, how is she supposed to be their one and only hope for these brim caps? What's going on? What are their goals? All we know is that they're supposed to be helpful, I guess, to Coco in some sort of way, but they also kind of do the absolute most too. They're on that Agot train too. They're doing the absolute most of Coco. They're putting her in situations that are ridiculous. And we're just kind of like, damn, leave Coco alone. She's just trying to live. She's just trying to save her mom. Leave her alone. All right? But it's really, really cool. I really enjoy seeing the brim caps, even though they're creepy. And they're constantly creepy in this weird, like, gross sort of creepo, creepo sort of way, where it's like, hey, little girl, would you like to buy a book? And it's like, yo, stop talking to little girls, a grown man, like, by yourself. It's creepy. Don't do that. Here's a panel where we have Brimcap staring at little girl. Creepy. Here's a panel where we have Brimcap clearly staring at the portal that Coco goes through. And we understand that, oh, he was probably staring at her the whole time that she was going through this challenge, right? Also creepy. Then here's another panel where at the sort of very beginning of the volume, we knew that, oh, hey, little girl, would you like to buy a book and a magic pen? Also creepy, all right? So it's stuff like that where you're just like, damn, these dudes are clearly pretty dangerous in some sort of way and very creepy, and they make you uncomfortable. And they're supposed to make you uncomfortable. They're creepy. Look at the designs. There's like a big eye in front of them, and it's like, ugh, it's creepy, all right? And that's something that I'm kind of going to get into a bit with the art. But for now, all I want to say is sort of like the characters are great. I love a lot of them when they're introduced. We don't get too much about, like Tetia and Riche, but that's okay because we get quite a bit of Agot and we get quite a bit of Coco. We get quite a bit of Queefree, and enough of sort of the brim caps to know that they're dangerous. So we get a lot actually, and it's really great that we don't get too much, but we get just enough. So when it comes to the art, that's something that I think is, it makes the volume. It absolutely makes the volume. And what's dope about the art is it's probably one of the few times where when I've read a manga, I had this really nostalgic sort of feeling that just like washed over me, even though it was a story that I had never been introduced to. And the reason for that is just because the art style is very distinct. It's very distinct in a particular way. What I mean by that is, if we look at sort of like a panel like this one, like the one I'm showing you right now, where you see Coco and you see the water and the deer and this whole sort of setup, and it looks like sort of like a portrait. What's really great about this image is, for me at least, it sort of harkens back to those moments where I was in an English literature class, and particularly an early modern English literature class. For those of y'all that know, whenever you're in one of those classes, you're gonna see a lot of art. You're gonna read a lot of weird sort of poetry. You're going to read a lot of Shakespeare. You're going to read a lot of stuff like that. And some of the art is very distinct in the sense of sort of like the woodcut kind of style. And for those of you who don't know, that don't know, here's sort of an example of sort of what I mean when I say a kind of like woodcut style. So when I'm talking about the woodcut style, one thing I want you to sort of really notice here is sort of the line work. The line work is very distinct. It's very sort of thick in a sense, and that's one thing that you will definitely notice when you look at the images. You'll notice that the line work is very distinct. It really sort of makes certain parts of the image pop in a particular way. Here's an example by Albrecht Dürer, who is one who's very famous for his woodcut art, and particularly his early modern woodcut art. So like 16th, 17th century, maybe even 15th, I'm not sure, but I know it's definitely 16th and definitely 17th, and maybe a little bit early 18th, right? So we have a lot of that stuff there, and you can sort of see the similarities between what's going on in his sort of image and what's going on in this sort of image over here when it comes to sort of like that distinct sort of like line work and what's sort of going on, and kind of this sort of like early modern vibe that you get. But then what you also notice is that there's a bit of that there. But in the image that I showed you a bit earlier, what you notice is that clearly it's a lot more defined. It's a lot more refined. It's clearly something that was made in a contemporary sort of setting, right? We've had, with digital art and all different types of artistic tools and stuff like that. And that's because Shida Hama is taking, not only, I think, inspiration from that sort of woodcut sort of style, but she's also a contemporary artist who worked for Marvel and DC and did a lot of variant cover work for them. And here are some examples here where you see, her cover for Birds of Prey and her cover for Star Wars, right? So it's very interesting that you see a lot of that, and it's great, and it's just an awesome, dope sort of combination of Marvel and DC, kind of like her Marvel and sort of DC variant artwork, and also just old school woodcut style, Dürer sort of style, right? From this, 16th, 17th, maybe even a little bit of 15th sort of centuries, right? With that, and distinctly, it's very distinct. You can kind of see it. It's very obvious, and she just mashes them together. And it's dope, and it creates this really great aesthetic that you see all the way throughout the volume. So when I think about the art, what I also want to sort of talk about is the panel work. So what you see is a lot of sort of instances where Shida Hama is either eschewing lines, right, like sort of boundary, like panel boundaries, where you don't see that stuff, where there aren't really any gutters or anything like that. It's just, here is this art, and then here's sort of like a part of this page that might be considered a panel, like a sort of panel, but maybe you don't necessarily consider it a panel. And it's really great. So here's an example where you sort of see, right, Coco, and you see all the sort of like luminous sort of like art around her, and you don't really see any boundaries. And that's because I think in some ways Shida Hama is trying to sort of say, hey, sometimes when you're drawing art for a manga, panel boundaries are not particularly helpful. You don't need a boundary for every piece of art that you draw in a manga. Right? And I really appreciate that. Here's an example where she's using the where she's using the panels though, right? She says she's using the panel boundaries, and you see in this instance where Coco is sort of thinking about, learning magic and getting better at it and passing this test, that the sort of boundaries create this really neat shift, this atmospheric and sort of like environmental sort of shift where it's just from night to day. And the weather sort of is a little different and stuff like that. And it's really interesting because the boundaries sort of sort of draw your eye to that shift. Whereas if those boundaries weren't there, you might not notice that as much. You might see it a bit, but it wouldn't be as distinct. Do you know what I mean? So here's an example where, again, you see a sort of mixture of the two, where there are some panel boundaries that are clearly not utilized, and then there's sort of panel boundaries that are utilized to connect two pages, where you see sort of Coco moving from one page to the next page. This is one example where she's like in her boat, and she's figured out how to use the wind sigil, the wind sign, to push her, to sort of go off her boat and to fly, and you see it move from the right of this initial page to the left of this subsequent page, and it's really, really dope that you see that. It's very cool. I really like that. I thought that was great. That's a sort of instance where you see that. And there's this panel where we see them you see that like a little sort of staircase connecting both pages, and that's really dope because I think, you know, if you looked at it in the sort of manga volume, it might not be as clear, but when you if you purchase it digitally, it's very very clear that um, you can see sort of a character, right, moving from one part of the page to the other page, and it's really really nice. And I think again, one thing that's really great about Shirahama's panel work is that she they do a great job of drawing your eye from one direction to like in one direction, right? That's what I really love about that. I think the panel work is stunning. It's very 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 good. And other times, here are some examples where you get a bit of portrait work, right, where where he's a panel where Coco is remembering her memories of when she was when she went to sort of like the village sort of market or whatever, and where she bought the book from the brim cap, and it's sort of in this portrait, and it's really really neat, and I think that's sort of great. And there are other moments too where we get that sort of portrait work, and that only adds to sort of a very kind of like interesting sort of almost commentary on Coco sort of seeing sort of memories through her sort of portrait, and then we're also kind of seeing like her sort of look through the portrait. One thing that I also really want to sort of talk about, that I sort of forgot to talk about in terms of panel work, and I want to talk about it now, is the way that Shirahama sort of also does a little bit of kind of, I guess maybe I would sort of call it meta work, sort of almost sort of metatextuality, I guess, in a sense, where we get Coco sort of drawing this globe on this page, and Queefrey is sort of telling a story about how magic really sort of like brought wars into existence and other things into existence. And that's really great because, again, it's sort of like when we're reading things, we bring worlds into existence through our imagination. And there's a great way that Shirahama does this sort of meta sort of textual work where it's sort of saying, hey, here is this girl drawing this globe, and then what we sort of get from that is that you can sort of write things into existence. You can draw things into existence from your imagination, from your use of magic. But as readers, we can also sort of bring these things into existence through our imagination, through our reading of this text. I thought that was like phenomenal. That's like a great bit of panel work where Coco is literally drawing the thing that we see sort of on the page. She's literally drawing a panel, like a part of the story, like a physical part of the story. That's awesome. So, would I suggest Witch Hat Atelier to people? Yep. Definitely check it out. It's a dope volume. I really, really love just, again, like the ways that the story, the art come together to really form this just a great, amazing first volume. This great story that just draws you in and you want to keep reading more. There are currently 5 volumes out. I have all of them, and it just gets better after every volume. You finish volume 2, you're like, where is volume 3? Why do I gotta wait months to read volume 3? And it's just like, you get why, because there's a lot of work that goes into it, clearly. But you're just like, oh, I want the next volume. That's the kind of manga it is. So what I suggested to pretty much individuals like of most ages, yeah. If you have a kid that's like 11 years old and they're looking into something that they really, really want to read, maybe even 10, I would say, yeah, check it out. I'd probably say 11. I think 11, like middle school, like starting 6th grade. That's something that they would really, really like. I think it's a story that they love. And even adults, it has that maturity that it needs for adults to sort of continue to be invested. But it also has that sort of like nice, fun sort of vibe, but also intense vibe that children will really like. Where, you know, children are a bit mature too, right? And they want to read stories that, you know, aren't going to insult their intelligence or anything. So I think it works really well for children and adults. So anyone from like 11 and up, I think you should definitely give this text to. Definitely ask them to check it out. One thing I also really wanted to say is the thing I love is the sort of back cover. So the front cover is really great, and we see the front cover here, but the back cover, and I'm going to put up an image right now, where we really get this dope Shakespearean sonnet that just kind of, it seems like it comes out of nowhere. But when you really think about the woodcut sort of like artistic style and the sort of early modern vibe that you get from Witch Hat Atelier, it makes total sense. It makes total sense that you would get a Shakespearean sonnet from a manga that sort of clearly is sort of inspired by that early modern woodcut art style, and feels like you would see it in a Northern anthology of English literature. You know what I mean? It just works. It just works. It's a great sonnet. I'd recite it, but I'm not going to. You can read it on your own. All right. I'm not gonna do that because I'm not. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. All right. Anyways, definitely check out Witch Hat Atelier. All right, by Kamome Shirahama. Shirahama. It's pretty inexpensive. You can go and buy it. I'm not saying you have to go buy it. Right? If you can't afford it, then you can't afford it. All right. Sometimes you can't afford that manga, and that's fine. All right. But if you can, and if you feel like you can go and grab it, pick it up. I would suggest you pick it up in print if you really want that sonnet because I didn't see the sonnet in the digital copy that I have. But if you want it in print, if you want that sonnet, get it in print. Or you can just come back to this video and take the picture of the sonnet and save it for your own selves or whatever. But I think there are things for print and digital. If you want to go print, I think the volume is great for print. I think sometimes the art looks really, really great when you're reading it from a print book. Then in ways that it might not look digitally. Like you can still see certain things, but I think the woodcut sort of line work really works well on the page, on the printed page. Whereas if you're looking for sort of like a lot of that panel work and sort of seeing those distinct transitions and that sort of thing, then I think digitally it works really well. Where it's very clear that you can see it because it's so straight, right? Where you can see all of that. You can see the transition from one page to the next. When you see that gorgeous portrait at the beginning of the volume that's in that color portrait, looks beautiful digitally. Beautiful, all right? And it looks great on the page too, but digitally it's like, damn, all right? So either one I think works depending on what your preference is. Me personally, I'd probably end up buying the print version just because I like print versions, but also because I think there are some things that are included that work. But it does help, like if you want to do a review or if you want to do something like that, then it helps to have the digital copy because you don't want to be sitting there scanning things and doing all this type of work. All right, they're not paying me to do that, so I ain't doing that. All right, that's it for my review. Thank y'all for coming through to this review, this Patreon review. All right, again, if you are interested in seeing more reviews and you want to see more reviews like this one, feel free to, again, support the Patreon, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter so you can get notifications for whenever I'm live streaming for reactions and doing reviews and that sort of thing. All right. And also, just if I have a message or I want to say something about what I'm doing on the channel or maybe make an announcement about something or whatever. All right. Feel free to subscribe, follow, and support the Patreon. I'm the Black Manga Critic. Thank y'all for coming through to this review, and I'm out ya.